From Mount Panorama, we go to a damp German countryside here as we welcome you to round 3 of the 23rd season of the North American Sim Racing Series here from the Grand Prix circuit at the Nurburgring, joined as always here this season by the ever-talented Elliot Brown. And Elliot, we know that it's not the Nurburgring, it's not the Nordschleife, shall we say, but it is going to be just as chaotic.
Yeah, this is going to be one of those tracks where there's a lot of skill and there's a lot of variance, and it's going to be chaotic into turn 1. We are in the rain, and the rain is going to make that first lap really challenging for a lot of these drivers, so it's going to be interesting to see how well they can handle the pressure and the complications of the weather.
Also interesting to note, as you obviously heard from Elliot, we're in the rain here, and we have a very interesting mix, shall we say, of places where things can go right, where things can go wrong. Grass is going to obviously be a no-no here, but you got to be so careful with some of the different curbing you're running. Again, we see it in numerous parts of the course here, but it's for sure a level of commitment as we're still waiting for Elliot to change. I'm not going to flame you. I think you got to switch the program, though.
Well,
There we go.
You didn't tell me yet, Jackson, but it's fine.
I'm sorry. I
was going to let you do the whole build them up, intro thing, and here you go.
Oh,
You're like, no, we got to get right into it.
We're good.
And there's some cars in the grass already. That's a fun time.
Trouble early on here.
We're already seeing, and this is the thing with this circuit. So I've been driving around this circuit for the last couple days in this weather condition, and it is terrifying. Those curbs that normally in the dry you can kind of think about taking and you can look at are so slick. They are absolutely incredibly devastating if you put throttle on any of those curbs. The grass, the curves, they're all going to be a challenge for these drivers. They're going to want to take as much curb as they can safely, and that's where we're going to see a lot of effort put in.
Green flag laps underway here. Laps at pace underway here with about 15 minutes to go. And yeah, I think curbing, it's going to be a developmental game of trust throughout the race. There are some areas in the Schumacher S, like we talked about earlier, where maybe you can run it if you're brave enough. Brakes is instantly going to be a no-no no matter where you are on track. But if you have a car, a setup that is comfortable enough for you, you can run it. And right now we're seeing Michael Quant with that level of safety. Ty Switt is also incredibly confident in that BMW. Let's talk about the cars really quickly, as we've seen in House of Practice and in testing this week, the BMWs are fast. That should be a surprise to nobody. The two cars that are kind of leading the technical war on ABS and traction control, both the BMW and the Ferrari, are going to be very, very fast here. But I think one that's maybe surprised both of us, Elliot, it's the Hondas.
I don't know that I can say it surprised me, only because we've seen the Hondas in the wet in previous seasons. We've seen how well those NSXs can perform when you have a good tune and you have a good, driving style for these types of conditions. So I am absolutely not surprised if we see some of those Hondas up front. I think we're already seeing, Sturdivant putting in the fastest lap so far. That'll obviously be, a target that's a moving target, but we're already going to see those mid-engine cars especially be really strong front runners atypically.
Riding on board with the number 5 Apex advisory machine of your provisional pole sitter here in this Vaporwave Honda NSX. I think the other thing we've really got to talk about, it's been a slow start to the season for Michael Landry. Wasn't really around for Oulton Park, was having a really, really good result at Bathurst, and kind of threw it away at the last lap, made a crucial mistake there and finished outside of the top 5. And somehow, some way, the 4-time champion here at NASRS not only is winless, he's podiumless.
Yeah, it was a little surprising. He's having a tough season start right now. I know it's not getting him down. He's still being just as cheerful and as ready to go racing as he can. But, it was an uncharacteristic mistake at Bathurst, I think. He had that locked up, and then out of nowhere, it looked like through Skyline, he just absolutely wrecked his car. And we don't see Landry do that a lot. There are some drivers on this track we'll see take those types of risks and be incredibly daring when it comes to how they drive and where they go with it. Speaking of one, Arjun Lakshmi Narish. I can't pronounce his last name.
I just go off at Arjun because there's a lot going on there. He's second quickest right now.
He is absolutely one of those drivers that's going to put the car on its absolute limit. And so we're going to see, an interesting battle in this rain because the rain levels the playing field, I think. I think Landry, this is probably the least likely race for Landry to win if I were going to say at the beginning of the season, where is Landry strongest and weakest? I think this is probably the race where he's going to be weakest only because it's full wet. Full wet is going to give everybody a level playing field because you all have the same grip limit at that point. So, it's going to be interesting to see how he takes advantage of it today.
He's put nearly 3/10 up on Davin Sturdivant to take that pole away provisionally. And, I mean, you nailed it on the head there, Elliot. I think we don't take it lightly when we say that it's like seeing a comet, seeing a Michael Landry mistake. And for it to be so costly and in such a big location there at Bathurst, it's very, very rare. And, he set the tone very early in this season. I want to bring the fight to Mikel Charles. I want to go back to my winning ways. And right now it's looking very good, but Zach Martin has returned fire. Not enough to close the gap, though, as he gets his Ford Mustang within 1.19 seconds. Davin still holds on at his best time. Now Arjun jumps up just inches behind Zach Martin. So your provisional top three, Landry, then neck and neck right behind it's Zach Martin and Arjun.
So here's who I want to look for. Who's not on track right now? Because this track is going to dry out extremely quickly. Even though it's pouring down rain, when you have, what do we have today? We have 25 drivers doing laps around this track right now at full speed, blowing all that water off the track, clearing away. They're going to dry up the line. And if you're smart, you're going to look at that and you're going to say, okay, my fastest lap is going to come in another 6 minutes probably.
100%. And I think one of the guys we're seeing wait and now come out is Jorge Blasini Rivera in that number 11 BMW M4. We talked earlier at the start of the season, and his main objective was just, I want top threes. I want podium results. I want to be running up front. And Bathurst very much delivered that result for him. He was kind of handed the win after that Landry mistake, shall we say, as we watch him throw his lap away and return to the garage. But, we talked briefly after Bathurst, and I was like, hey, you got your top three finish. And he was like, still not enough. I thought I had the pace to bring it to Joel Klaus, and I'm still going to be kicking myself over that. So, don't talk to me until I have some consistent top three results. So he's someone to look out for. Zach Martin is absolutely someone to look out for right now, as he's gotten that Mustang 0.060 within Michael Landry. I think Landry still got a little bit in the tank when it comes to Delta, but he's got a couple of guys real close to him right now for that provisional pole spot.
Yeah, Landry is, seeing Landry, Zach, Davin, and Arjun at the front doesn't surprise me at all. We talked all week about the rain, and we've been, vacillating back and forth on who's going to be the strongest. We've all agreed that the mid-engines are going to be extremely powerful this week. We've all agreed that they're going to see a lot of, even with BOPs, they're going to see a lot of advantage there. And I'm really looking forward to seeing in the race, how does this pace hold up?
I think it's definitely, that was the big thing we heard from Davin early on, where if you can't be fast at this track, just be consistent and try to predict where the water's going to rise, where it's going to fall. Because not only is it raining, there's a lot of elevation change and a lot of downhill braking zones. We're watching Mikhail do that right now as he works his way down to the hairpin. Not only do you have gravity working against you going into those kinds of corners, but there's a large buildup in those kind of apexes. So developing those kind of not relationships, but getting that knowledge of the course and kind of anticipating where you're going to have grip, where you're not going to have grip, is really, really going to be a huge factor for victory today. And I think you look at how much guys like Zach Martin, like Davin Sturdivant and Michael Landry have laps here. Like, that's a relationship that's already been developed, and that's very much a big advantage for them early on. Your top three right now, still Landry, Martin, and Sturdivant. Further back, Arjun, then Mikhail Charles comes into the scene in fifth. After that, Michael Quant, Carter Hain, I almost said Gavin Head again. It's Grayson Head, Zach McClare, and Adrian Movo running out your top 10 right now. 8 minutes, just under 9 minutes to go here in qualifying for round 3 of season 23 of the North American Sim Racing Series. For those of you just joining us here, it is a fully wet race. We're not expecting any of this to die out. We kind of have a designated full wet race. And if you want some more dynamic weather, some more unpredictable weather, you can join us next week at Monza. But the anticipation is going to be all rain. The big question, though, is, as Elliot maybe talked about a little bit earlier, not just how much it will rain, but how quickly is it going to dry out?
Oh, yeah. I mean, here we're going to see the track dry out fairly reasonably, but at Monza it's going to be interesting to see how fast that dries out if it does rain. You know, the Nurburgring is one of those tracks where you don't typically see a lot of large puddles. It's a lot of streaming water down track, but it's not necessarily standing water, and I think that's going to help a lot. We're not going to see as many drivers struggle with hydroplaning through that, through those types of, you know, environments like we might in a track or a situation where there's a lot of, you know, standing water and it's harder to gauge where the tires are and where the grip's going to be. But you know, it's going to be challenging, I think, for drivers to manage tires as the track starts to dry, because these wet tires are not necessarily designed to run that hot. They're designed to run at a higher pressure than the dry tires, but they're not designed to run as hot as you might think they could. So once we start getting into a drier track, you're going to see your target pressures go from, you know, a 30.2 or a 30.3 to a 30.8 or 9, and maybe even up to 31.5, and you're going to have to start tire management.
Right, and I think the big things that the rookies in chat need to learn is the track really doesn't have 2 modes. It has an infinite amount of modes between dry and wet, and your car's going to do a lot of different things because, you know, as you mentioned, Elliot, there's a part of the track where it's maybe wet enough where, you know, it's starting to get moist out there, but you don't want to warrant that switch over to the wet compound yet. And then, you know, right now I think you're going to see a lot of these guys running a more dry-based setup, but on wet compounds, you know, we'll have some guys run, you know, wet-based traction control setups or engine maps, and we're not quite seeing that level of downpour yet, but it could intensify further on, and we could see guys, you know, starting to have to make those kinds of adjustments on the fly.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and you said it. We run the dry setup, so we slap wets on it and we go, and that's what's going to be a challenge for some of these folks that haven't practiced as much in the wet, is that the dry setups, they can do a little bit of some pushing through the track a little harder, but are they going to damage that car? Are they going to cause those tires to wear out faster? Are they going to cause a loss of pressure? You know, that's something that we're going to see a lot of management for, I think, throughout the race, is folks looking at their opportunities for pit stops to manage those tires, to manage their fuel. You know, and at least for me, driving in the wet, I burned less fuel, so you can carry a little less on board, which gives you a little more speed, gives you a little more, you know, capability of getting on the throttle and your timing. So I don't know. It's anybody's ball game today.
Michael Landry back out to build some insurance on this 2:01.1 lap time right now. Davin Sturdivant right behind him has leapfrogged Zach Martin. Everybody within a tenth of each other on this provisional podium right now. It does not get a lot closer when it comes to competition. Want to talk more a little bit about this track right now, Elliot, because wetness is one factor, but you add in another level of unpredictability that this track has, and I think I like to describe it as a vibe check track, right? Braking points are there, but you don't have those normal 100, 150 kind of meter markers that we normally have. And I know coaches will always tell you to have those kind of non-visual or non-boarded markers anyway. But a lot of these areas, especially, you know, the arena you first see after turn 1, this area we're watching Greg Pacagnini work through right now, especially right here after the Schumacher S's with Brian Slater. You don't have a lot of physical markers here, and you just got to learn what your car is able to do on its limits of grip.
Yeah, it was something that I was talking to Brian earlier today or yesterday, and I was talking to him about, you know, my driving style in the AMG, the 2015 AMG rather than the 2020 AMG Evo that they're running here. And I was finding that I almost didn't even have to use brake markers. It was more of a brake by feel thing. And I think a lot of these drivers are looking for that brake by feel. They're looking for that turn by feel, that drive by feel. They're not even looking for brake markers a lot of the time anymore. They're just looking for how much speed do I have? How much speed can I carry? And where do I need to start bleeding that speed?
3.5 minutes to go here in qualifying. Absolutely heating up, though. Davin Sturdivant with a healthy delta right now. It's not going to be enough to close to Landry, but he is doing everything he can to get as much delta as possible out of that NSX. Just 0.03 of a second behind that McLaren of Landry right now. Provisional pole for the time is Michael Landry. As I say that, I believe Zach Martin right now is showing pace, though.
Yeah, Zach is on a flyer, and this is where we always make the joke that Landry is the target, right? He's the ultimate driver in this particular group. Is the joke? It's the the meme that we have going around the paddock, so to speak. But in the rain, it's going to shake things up. Landry's going to be under threat. He's going to be under threat the whole race. He won't be able to walk away like he always gets the opportunity to.
He's feeling the pressure right now in that final sector, and Zach Martin lost that delta. Still a little bit of improvement there, but only gains about 2-3 thousandths on that lap. 2 men out on track right now in the top four, excuse me, Landry and Martin. Further back, it is Michael Quant, Matt's brother, in that Ford Mustang, trying to get the other Ford in there. After that, Carter Hayne, who was looking mighty fast during practice in that other Honda, running in 7th. After that, Grayson Head.
Ooh.
Amos Movo. Ooh, trouble right now. Jesse Beauclair goes around.
Yeah, he slides off track. Fortunately, he's in an area where if you slide off and you're on the grass, everybody else is pretty much safe. The grass in the wet is absolutely unusable, so kudos for Jesse for stopping at the exact perfect spot to make sure that everybody saw him and did not need to move their line to get around him. Right now, we have Landry, Charles, and Sturdivant as our top 3, and that's definitely the first two expected. Sturdivant being in 3rd place right now. I'm not going to say a surprise, but it's nice to see. It's interesting to see the capabilities of those mid-engines today. As we talked earlier, as we talked through the week, the Honda is it's almost like a cheat code in the rain is kind of the running joke, that when you hop in the Honda, it's and so I was actually talking to one of the stewards that runs our stewarding division, and he kind of said something about the Mustang that I think is also true about the Honda. And the joke is always the Mustang is the meme car, it's the meta car, it's the you just go and you win car. And the Honda is very similar in the rain. And his comment was, well, of course, we get a lot higher top-end speed because it's like driving something that wants to kill you constantly.
Right.
And he's like, it's like a reward. The opportunity for us to be able to get that high top speed is why, for those of us driving the Mustang, that's our reward for driving something that wants nothing to do but kill you. And I think the Honda's the same way.
No, 100%. And I think you could also argue the Mustang, being the boat, is going to be comfortable and have that advantage in the water. But no, I think he nailed it on the head. And we saw that level of prowess from Carter Hayne and from the rest of the Hondas as well. For those of you who were with us last season, a great drive from Carter Hayne in the NSX to get that silver category win. Battled with Don Debian for the win, just outside of the top 10. But it was more of that expertise from Mikel Charles, who has now gotten that BMW up into second. 0.013 off of the pole right now. Top 3 is set. Landry, Charles, and Sturdivant. All 3 of them separated by just under 0.04 of a second.
I mean, it's incredible how tight that margin is. We look down, 4th place, Zach Martin. It's less than 1/10 of a second from 1 through 4. I don't know when else we've seen this.
It's got to be one of the closer qualifying gaps in NASRS history. I don't have my stats on me, but rest assured it doesn't get a lot tighter than this. Zach Martin, last one on a flyer right now, but he's about half a second off his best lap. Zach Leclerc also trying to improve right now, get that BFE Racing Porsche into the top 10. But as of right now, it seems like the standings are going to be as they are. Landry, Charles, Sturdivant, your top 3. And it is a McLaren, BMW, Honda, Ford. 4 different OEMs here in the top 4. If there is a cheat code, these guys haven't really found it yet.
I mean, in the top 5, you have 5 different manufacturers. It shows you just how tight racing in the wet really is. You know, the cars are so grip bottlenecked by the fact that those tires just cannot hold on to the ground the same way that they can in the drop. And that's what's going to really be the testament of the challenge for a lot of these folks.
Field is set here for round number 3 of season 23. Round number 4, excuse me. Racing in the Nurburgring in the wet when we come back. Stay with us. Quick reminder for all of you joining us on stream that you can be a part of this action going on right now next week. Still plenty of racing to come here in the Tuesday split North American Sim Racing Series, Monza, and several other rounds to come. Link in Discord will be given if you guys ask in chat. Someone in here will be more than happy to share it with you. And we race outside of Tuesdays as well. Tomorrow night it'll be GT4s and GT2s racing here in the wet. And it's on to the rookies, which is currently fully booked, but waitlist remains open for anyone interested there. North American Sim Racing Series on Sim Racing GP and Discord. I want to also thank our sponsors, Apex Advisory, the official coaching sponsor of the North American Sim Racing Series, and for Audio Coasters, another great partner of NASRS, helping us do what we love. Getting ready to go here. Cars rolling for a dank race here in the Nurburgring. Let's get set up here. Jackson Lambros, Elliott Brown. Let's go with the stars in the cars here. Working our way from the back to the front. At the back of the pack, it's Thomas Homer in that McLaren starting 25th. Nick Johnson making his debut in 24th. Watch for that CrowdStrike Mustang. Luis Acosta, another newcomer, lone Audi R8 tonight, 23rd. Jake Stork is in 22nd. He's in the BMW M4 for Turner Motorsport. Ty Sweat, another BMW, fellow Turner colors ahead of him for a all BMW back row. Layla Martinez, teammate of Homer in the number 20 Sky Tempesta McLaren. Don Debian, Ferrari 296 for PSR, starts 19th. Yet another BMW, Keith Bull for Turner, starts 18th. Jesse Beclaire, great qualifying for him. He starts 17th in that fellow BFE Porsche. After that, it's brother of Michael, Matt Quant, in that number 16 McLaren. Casey Jackman rounds out our top 15. He will be in the number 13 in that BMW M4. Elliot.
Slater in that number 2 Ferrari. We have David Pacagnini, first time showing for him this season in that Nissan GTR number 34. Josh Popov in the 24 Lamborghini. We have Zach Beauclair, the second BFE Porsche in the number 10. Jorge Blasini Rivera in the 11 BMW, and he's a little bit far back today. We'll see if he can make up some positions. We have Grayson Head showing up in the number 6 Mustang. Michael Quant, the other Quant, showing up in the number 16 Mustang. We have Arjun Lakshmi Narasimhan in the number 9 Mercedes. Carter Hain, first of our kind of top 6 in that number 1 NSX. Amos Movo in the 27 Ferrari. I think I stopped at the wrong spot. Sorry. Zach Martin in the number 19 Mustang. Davin Sturdivant in the 5 NSX, our number 1 NSX.
Carbon copy of the front row from Bathurst. It's Mikhail Charles on the outside of row 1. And on pole position is New Brunswick, Canada's Michael Landry. Couple of different factors here. One pit stop is ahead of us. A likely very chaotic turn 1 is ahead of us. Strategy is certainly anybody's call here.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we round out the final corner, we're going to get ourselves ready to do some serious racing here at a very wet Nurburgring GP.
The conditions will be wet for the next 65 minutes. The racing has already proven to be tight just on deltas alone, but how competitive will it be when it's wheel to wheel? Who is going to conquer the wettest race of the season? Let's find out. Let's get to it. Great jump from Mikhail Charles in that BMW M4 as instantly in lockstep, Landry takes a look to the outside. Here come the anchors into turn number 1. Big move on the inside there from Adrian Muvo. Bit of contact between two of them. Davin Sturdivant going to try to get a move on him. Won't be able to get it done as now that NSX gets checked up big time. Some moves on the inside, side by side here through the arena section.
Yeah, Zach Martin in that Ford Mustang looking inside on Sturdivant. This is going to make it tough for both of them getting a clean line coming out. And we're going to see Charles and Landry walk away with that perfect getaway as Landry gets back out front.
Great recovery drive from Michael Landry. Made contact with Charles in that first corner, but it is an absolute freight train further back. You got a move from Jorge Blasini Rivera in that NSX on the inside of, I believe, Zach Beclaire, who's dropped back. Big touch further back. Zach Beclaire gets into, I believe, Josh Pop if that Huracan goes around, but still Michael Landry up front, and a really, really great defense from him. Same for Davin Sturdivant, who's managed to hold off Zach Martin, and already we've got a drive-through penalty issued for Jesse Beclaire.
What did Jesse get a drive-through for? It's got to be a
I
jump
want to say
start or
it's for a
something
jump
like that.
start. Yeah.
Yeah, or the stewards are going to probably look at that and determine whether that's real or not. So we've got Mikhail in second, following Landry. They're delta about a half second right now. Sturdivant another, looks like about a quarter of a second back, and that's going to be a interesting. I didn't do what I wanted to. That's going to be an
It's all
interesting
good.
top three. Sorry, folks. I'm still getting used to some of the buttons.
We are all learning and developing. Mikhail
Ooh.
Charles already right in the gearbox of
Yeah.
Michael Landry, trying to find any real estate he can get that mustard M4 in. But again, Landry's got that powertrain on his rear wheels, and he's just able to take off in the straightaways and build a gap. Same too for Davin Sturdivant, who is just outside of drafting range from Zach Martin further back. I'm curious to see what that race start was like and how Charles was able to get such a good jump. I think we saw a little bit of the same at Suzuka last year, which was our wet race, and he was able to just make the most of that on the outside. So we'll have to have that under review. We've got trouble further back. It's the number 25 of Keith Bull, who goes broadside on the back straight as we're watching Zach Martin. You talked about this earlier, Elliot. This car constantly wants to kill you, but it rewards you with good pace, and we can see that struggle right now with all of that opposite lock in the 19.
Yeah, Zach is certainly he's fighting the Mustang battle. It's a worthy battle, I've been told by quite a few folks actually over the week. So, a lot of these guys driving these Mustangs, they know what it's going to do to them. Davin knows what the Honda's going to do to him. They know how to maximize it. So we're going to see him put in a lot of work today. I mean, Sturdivant right on the tail of Charles. That's typically uncharacteristic, but it's great to see how much that BMW has to really fight in this condition.
Sturdivant trying to capitalize on, I believe, a wide Charles going through the hairpin there, but Mikhail's been able to get this gap going. I'm starting to believe a rare thing we see is a Davin that gets hot under the collar, but he knows that there's pace in that NSX, and he's trying to maybe get his way on to Michael Landry, but Mikhail Charles is in the way. I really think everybody in the top 5 has some magnificent pace, some race-winning pace, but no one is able to get past each other, or at least has the courage to do so this early on in the race, Elliot.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's tough in the wet, and it's even tougher at this track in the wet. I'm looking right now at our movers so far. So position changes have been a Carter Hayne has dropped down to an Arjun from 6th to 7th. We have Brian Slater moving up 2, Casey Jackman moving up 2, both of them taking over Josh Popov. Next we have, is this Michael or Matt? This is so difficult. We gotta give these guys a different first name. We have a Matt Quant who has. I'm voting that we give Matt Quant a different name. We'll call him. I
like that.
Matt Quant has moved up 1 position. Don Debian has moved up 3. Ty Switz moved up 4. Jesse Beauclair surprisingly only dropped 1 position. He had a strong qualifying, and he's having a very strong race so far. Acosta's up 4. Stork is up 2. Pacagnini, I'm not sure what happened, but he's down 8. That's a big unfortunate drop for him. He was 13th in qualifying, and now he's 21st. Thomas Homer.
Got in contact earlier on, I believe, just going back really quick, because people in chat were asking what happened to Dave Back. I think he got in contact with, it might have been Josh Popov, honestly. If not, it was one of the mid-engine cars. I want to say it was either Zach or Josh, but has dropped back further. We'll see if Race Control has anything to react as a result. Let's talk about this guy right here, Amos Movo, Kansas City, Missouri guy. We really haven't seen that much from him this season, although me and Elliot did watch him race in the R8 exhibition right before we got this season started. He was insanely fast in that Ferrari 296. He's making his debut tonight. It's his first ever NASRS Tuesday night race, and he's already running in the top 5.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm very happy to see the work that a lot of these drivers are putting in to get their opportunity to be at the top of this field. Looking right now, it looks like our fastest car so far has been Michael Quant with a 246 kilometer an hour speed trap, and that is second place to that goes to Jorge Blasini Rivera and Mikhail Charles. So that Mustang showing how fast it is, and Zach Martin just put the same speed in. That's got to be at the end of that back straight before we entered the chicane.
Yeah, and that's going to be a shocker to no one. The straight line of the Mustang is absolutely unbeaten. But if you're looking for acceleration, look no further than the Carter Hayne #1 machine right now, as the electronics are dialed in. The mid-engine platform is working absolutely to the best of its advantage. But let's talk about another man hard charging right now. It's Arjun Lakshminarasimhan, who is trying to get to the rear bumper of Movo right now. He wants that top 5 spot real bad.
Arjun's going to have to fight for it, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this was the place he finished at Olton.
It was one of the early on spots. We talked about this earlier on. I believe it was back at Bathurst. He did the extreme undercut, not because he wanted to, but because of some issues he faced earlier on, and it actually went to pay off
very well. Yeah, I mean, and it turns out I have recently learned, actually not so recently, I learned about a week and a half ago that undercut was because he put wets on at the start of the race.
Picked the wrong race for that then.
Yeah, I'm like, buddy, this is not the Nurburgring. But I mean, it just goes to show you how with some serious skill and some good planning, you can turn what is a very tough pit stop into a very, very good pit stop. I'm looking right now, and I'm seeing some investigations from some stewards. I saw a warning for number 409, the Jesse Beauclair car, for unpredictable driving. Fortunately, no penalty on that.
We're going to have to go back to that really quickly as we've got side-by-side racing in the chicane. Yeah, Davin Sturdivant gave the outside open there to Zach Martin. That's a tough place to overtake, and big drama there for Zach Martin as he loses it a little bit on the brakes. Movo thought about a look on the inside, but backed out of it. That might give Arjun an opportunity to attack further back.
This is going to mix the grid up. That move from Zach on Davin he didn't seal the deal, and he should have, and that's going to cost him. As Movo, and a touch from Movo, and that's a spin.
Trouble for Zach Martin. Ooh. Martin goes around. He tried to rejoin. He almost collected the fellow Mustang. It's heartbreak for Zach Martin, who drops well out of the top 10 trying to rejoin. Same issues for Amos Movo, who I believe also got collected somehow. I think he struggled to get that Ferrari refired.
Yeah, Amos touched the back of Zach and caused Zach to spin, and I don't know if Amos, maybe he said, I'm going to wait and hope that if I get back on track behind him, the stewards are nicer. But that gives Davin and Arjun, that opens their race up entirely. Davin's defense is no longer necessary at all. He can go back into coast mode.
So that'll promote Michael Quant up into 5th, Carter Hayne now up into 6th. Those two still very much battling, by the way. But that definitely opens up the racetrack big time, as you said, Elliot, for both Davin Sturdivant and Arjun. And, I mean, that's the biggest Davin strat you could give. Give him the illusion that you can make an overtake and let the drama happen in your rearview mirrors. Let other guys get involved with one another. If I got to let other guys make mistakes for me and I don't have to force them into it, that's the easiest thing I can do, right?
You know, we always talk about it with Davin especially. We always talk about the mindset that he brings into the race where he says, you know what, I don't have to be the fastest. I just have to get to the end first.
No, 100%. And you could also make an argument about the Zach Martin move there, that was maybe a little bit...
It was a little ambitious.
That's
not
the easiest place to make an overtake. Granted, no car eats curbs for breakfast like the Mustang that Zach had, but that was going to be a hard move to stick. Let's go back through race control, because I'm sure Greg Catch is working real hard right now on this sheet in that race control box.
Yeah, I'm seeing notations on some incidents. We'll be keeping an eye on that. There have been no... I've seen a +5 for somebody coming out. We'll figure out who that is here in a moment, but some avoidable contact earlier in the race.
Matt Kwan on the move right now, looking to the inside of, I believe, Amos Movo, vice versa of that Movo, trying to get back on the move and recover, get his way into the top 5. He's gotten right past Matt Quant. That's Don Debian further behind in that red Ferrari 296. But recovery drive is already very much in progress right now for the Kansas City kid.
Yeah, Movo and Martin are absolutely in recovery mode. They're going to be thinking long-term now. They're not going to be thinking about battling, folks. They're going to be thinking about what easy passes can I make, how fast can I get there, and if I have to pit early to make it happen, I will. This field, because it's such a high school field, everybody's bunched up. So if you're going to, and Nick Johnson and Layla Martinez and Keith Bull all kind of run, or not Keith Bull, that's Thomas Homer.
A couple of guys we haven't seen so far. First race for for Nick Johnson in that CrowdStrike Mustang. After that, it's the teammates of Martinez and Homer behind him. A great move from Johnson to get by, as those two McLarens are going to battle further back.
They're certainly going to be battling for, who's the best of effectively the rest, as they say in our good old Formula One commentary. I mean, the field does end up split. The field ends up a little bit grouped up in two sections, typically, sometimes three. We have our leaders, our mid-pack, and our back markers. So it's one of those things where, if you're the best back marker, you still beat some other folks on track.
By the way, Thomas Homer did end up as the loser in that occasion, I believe. No, it was Layla Martinez in that Taco Bell car that went wide and got into the trap there after the Schumacher S's. Looking at Slater right now trying to dig on Zach Leclerc. Been a quiet race so far. Canadian driver started in 14th, so some solid progress from him. But he's looking to dig right now, get past this comic book Porsche.
Yeah, I think Slater may have executed one pass so far. I'm just looking at some deltas, and it looks like most of the opportunities he's seen have come from folks, the Zach Martin Amos Movo incident. The incident with David Pacagnini has promoted him, so Slater's doing a good job of just keeping his nose clean so far.
Here's the other Gabagool racing driver, Josh Popov, who we have not seen yet in season 23. He's the lone Lamborghini Huracan on track tonight. But this is a pairing up that we have not seen very frequently. Very, very rarely do we see numerous teams out. We've had podium hunters. We've had beginner's luck in those two McLarens running further out back. But both Pacagnini and Popov being involved in some incidents earlier on. Let's talk also about Casey Jackman in front there, who had a really, really hot start. Stood on the podium at Olton Park, was hoping to carry that momentum into Bathurst. Had a battle go sour with, the guy in front of him, actually, Brian Slater. There's a good amount of real estate between both of them right now. But, again, things are starting to heat up. I think we're starting to get into that point in the race where we can dial it down. We can maybe start to coexist on track with one another.
And I'm looking right now, so there was a +5 for Pacagnini, and the ruling is that it was a avoidable contact situation, so that's unfortunate for him. Not only did he lose quite a few positions, but he's also got a 5-second penalty coming to him as well.
I believe he got into Jesse Beclair. I'm trying to remember what the other car was that was involved there was. But we've got a 4-car freight train developing here.
It was Popov. It was, that's interesting. It was two Gabagools fighting each other.
Two Gabagools get into it. Interesting. 4-car freight train going on right now. Zach Martin trying to claw his way back into the top 10. Then a pair of BMWs, two guys looking very hard for podium results. Two guys that have stood on the podium, Casey Jackman and JBR, as they work their way through the arena section.
And notice that, the BMWs seem to be, apart from Charles, we can't count Mikhail, right? Because the way he drives that thing is like he wants to die in it. So the remaining BMWs are almost all outside of the top 10. The only one in the top 10 right now is Rivera, and that's just because we had that incident with Martin and Movo.
One of the guys we were expecting maybe a little bit deeper in the field was JBR. He spent so much time this weekend not just getting laps in, but inviting guys in the league to just go do 1v1s. He said, I want to learn what the limits of these tracks are. Can I stick this car in certain areas? What do I need to do to maximize every corner and make it battleable? You see a big wiggle from Zach Martin in that Ford Mustang, though. It cleared Jackman right now, but is battling that car constantly as Popov goes deep on the brakes there to try and close the gap. JBR's taken off right now, and it's kind of become a 3-car freight train behind him.
So far, Carter Hayne is back in the same position he qualified in. Isn't that a little bit ironic for him? He lost one at the start, picked one up due to the Martin incident, and he's just been driving nice and clean.
Another guy we've been kind of calling, if not a top 5, we were thinking a top 3 is in the cards. It still certainly is if he drives the way he has in the first 15 minutes. But the Tennessee guy is certainly used to this kind of weather when it comes to driving. He's got Matt Quant in front of him, which is a guy he's battled with forever. Same with Grayson Head and his mirrors. So these are guys that are comfortable with leaning on one another. But again, I think it's pack tactics for these three, trying to close that gap to Arjun, to Davin, to everybody in front. And then after pit stops, whether we're taking fuel or whether we're getting tires, it will be the point where we maybe start to turn up the wick. What you got, Elliot?
Oh, it's Casey Jackman and Zach Martin going side by side through turn 2 into the arena section.
So Zach Martin trying to get his way through here. Both of these BMWs have walled him incredibly tough.
Martin got ahead.
Yeah, got the move done.
He got ahead in the arena, so now it's Martin following Rivera. That's going to put some pressure on Jorge because it looks like the Mustang might actually be the better car to be driving in the wet here today.
Somehow, some way, we weren't expecting the Mustang to have this result. I think we certainly weren't expecting Matt Quant to be the fastest of those Mustangs right now, sitting in 5th. But some guys are charging incredibly hard right now, and one of them is Zach Martin, currently in 11th. If you're joining us right now, had a big incident with the Ferrari of Movo. It was, by the way, just outside of this freight train. You can see him there going into the stadium section. And further up front, we're watching the Padawan and the Jedi go at it right now. Arjun Lakshmi Narasimhan close that gap. Big wiggle, using all the curb he can through the penultimate corner there to close that gap to the NSX. We were not expecting this pace from the AMG GT3 at all, but he is lockstep right now with the league owner, Davin Sturdivant.
He is absolutely keeping tight to Davin, keeping Davin's car filling his entire windshield, and as a result, filling Davin's entire rear mirror. Now, we always say it. We say it every race. We say it every time we talk about him. Davin is not a guy that cares about the pressure. It's completely unknown to him, so Arjun is going to have to work for it.
And we saw that a couple minutes ago, just when Zach Martin chucked it up the inside and tried to make it stick. Davin didn't crack, and the guys just made their own mistakes. Want to give a shout out to the Beauclair Brigade here, as we've got a lot of family members, wives, significant others cheering on father and son, Jesse and Zach in chat. Zach running in the top 10 right now. Guys, Jesse was looking so good, was looking for a top 15 start, had a slightly dramatic opening lap there, but he's kept it refired, running in 17th. So good effort so far from the two Porsches, the two Beauclairs.
Yeah, Jesse's still he is exactly where he started. He qualified 17th. He's still 17th. He's staying out of trouble. If he does that all race, he'll see himself do. This is going to be a very good finish for him today.
We mentioned earlier new colors for Jesse. He'd been running the copy of Zach's kind of comic book livery that Dave Packing-Ninny had made for him. I saw what the kind of fuzzballs were on it earlier. I knew it wasn't Chewbacca. I need you to remind me what it was.
Oh, it was it's that creature from the Dark Crystal. I got to think of its name. Hold on. Let me furiously Google.
Guys in chat are going to know this instantly. The Beauclairs in chat are going to know this instantly.
They are, and it's...
But we're watching...
Fizzgig. It's a Fizzgig.
Fizzgig, yes. Thank you. Fizzgig colors right now for Jess Beauclair in 17th. Battle heating up all around the field, honestly, right now, as we've seen Martin work his way forward. Now it's Amos's turn. He's trying to get that Ferrari around the fellow Italian carbon fiber of that Hurricane of Josh Popov. That'll be postponed right now, as our first taker to the pit road will be Amos Movo.
I think that's a smart move by Movo after that incident a couple laps ago. You know, we're in what I think of as the pit window. You know, you got to be outside the first couple laps. You want to be outside the last couple laps, and I think we're in that spot where he can think about a pit stop and say, okay, I made a mistake earlier, and how do I best take care of this? for Movo, this is going to be a recovery drive. For Martin, this is going to be a recovery drive. So both of them now thinking very hard about how do I do this recovery drive.
I would say clean air is almost even more of an advantage here, just because you don't need to try and predict what the guy in front of you is going to do. There's less factors to worry about. So I like this call. I think the other thing we've got to kind of mention is tires, because you're running naturally at a slower speed, and it's an entirely different compound. Again, these wet racing tires, much like your normal tires on your road car, have channels kind of dug into them to kind of dig the water out from the groove and give you as much grip as possible. They heat up a lot faster. They wear a lot slower. So I think we could see a couple guys maybe trying to undercut, try and stay on one set of tires, save a little bit of time in the pit row, and leapfrog people on that mandatory stop.
Oh, yeah, and being in the back is not a bad thing if you can make that undercut work, because, you mentioned the clean air. The thing that a lot of folks forget about driving in the rain is there's so much spray off of these cars. I mean, when you're driving this close like Arjun is behind Sturdivant, your windshield is absolutely filled with nothing but water. And so getting clean air is going to make you faster naturally, as we see a 10-second penalty applied to Thomas Homer. This is...
Oh, boy.
This is going to put a damper on his opportunity. It's some aggressive driving according to the steward ruling. So we're going to see how he manages that and where he falls towards the end of the race. He's currently...
I think that might have... back in 22nd. I think that was during the battle with Layla that we saw that drama unfold.
Yes.
But going back to the spray... Yeah, going back to the spray talk, that's why we have these flashing rain lights you can see on the back of these cars right now, just under the rear bumper. And we're watching right now Grayson Head get a nice dosage of spray right now from Carter Hayne, as he's been running very consistent so far as well. Moving over from the AMG to the Mustang this year, wanted to give that a try. Still trying to... I asked him when he was going to get his own livery right now. He said, as soon as I can potentially go get it. So... struggling to get his own colors right now. He'll be just fine with the Ford Performance colors right now, but really, really good showing right now from the Fords. 5th, 7th,
oh, absolutely, and
almost 3rd right now for almost the 3rd from Zach Martin. 13th now. Yeah,
I kind of am a little bit surprised that the Mustangs are performing so well, being such a big front engine car that they are. I gotta think that it's just the nature of the car itself. Like Greg was telling me earlier this week, that car, it's very hard to drive as Zach Martin goes into the pits. So that's going to be his... Was it Martin? Has he... Hold on, I'm getting...
It was Martin.
Now.
It was indeed Martin. He liked the card Movo played and decided to follow suit.
Yeah.
And he is leapfrogged massively, as Movo's still back in 23rd right now. Martin merges out in 22nd, almost 14 seconds between these two after they got tangled on lap number 3. So that is your mandatory pit stop out. You got to make these tires, this tank of gas, last for the next 40 minutes.
It's not 14 between them. It's 1.7. Zach came out right behind Amos.
I'm watching my timing screen update. You are absolutely right. Movo actually got the undercut done and now leads again. Trouble once again for Jesse Beclair as he gets around.
Ooh.
But we'll resume in 17th. We're watching the battle right now on screen with Davin Sturdivant and Arjun Lakshmi Narasimhan. So we already saw right here what kind of advantage you can gain or lose from the pit stops. We're getting to about that halfway point when it comes to stops. So I think a very pivotal thing here is going to be the pit cycle.
Yeah, this is where, after watching, I don't know, let's see what kind of pace Amos and Zach put in, but I got to think that this is going to be a good time to start thinking about a pit stop. That's really going to mix up the grid out front. I mean, the undercut here in general works pretty well because it's such a tight track and so hard to pass, but then you add the rain. I mean, the undercut in the rain is one of those superpowers, if you can wield it correctly, as we watch Don Debian travel around the hairpin down, coming up to the Schumacher S's. I mean, this part of the track, I've been driving this all week. This part of the track is a really challenging area, but I love it. It is absolutely incredible. As through the final chicane go Arjun and Davin, and Arjun right on Davin's tail.
I thought about maybe jamming it up the inside. Davin trying to make that NSX as wide as possible, but they are lined up bumper to bumper right now. Again, that Honda just has so much more acceleration, but Arjun has the top end. Are we going to see a move to the inside? There's a little bit of a look from Arjun. Now goes wide. He's trying to get as much of an exit as possible to get as much traction as possible heading into the stadium section, but it's not enough.
The battle of the front and the mid. I mean, this is what we talked about all week, because it's going to come down to how you handle your car. It's not going to come down to what car is OP here. You know, we say the Hondas are OP here. We say that the Fords now are OP here. I mean, the Fords are OP everywhere, so I don't even know if that really counts. But let's be honest, right? But now we're seeing the two drivers here that, I mean, they have a great deal of driving skill. They have a lot of trust in each other, as we can see Arjun in Davin's rear view camera. This is going to be a very heated battle throughout the rest of this race. And I think what Davin's going to try to do, if I were Davin and I'm sitting here with Arjun right behind me, and it's hard to pass, we're in the rain, right? I'm just going to do everything I can to keep him kind of running as slow as I reasonably can without giving it up. And then I'm going to pit by surprise.
Oh, 100%. No one has seen competition more than Davin, obviously, as the league showrunner. But might be unexpected to some. Arjun's been kicking around since season 10. So absolutely has driven everything when it comes to not just cars, but controls. Won in his class last year at Suzuka on an Xbox controller while he was moving. So absolutely one of the most dynamic drivers. As that battle heats up, battle further back right now, as it is one of the Mustangs. Carter Hayne right now under fire from both of the Mustangs.
Yeah, and little shout out to Joel Klaus, who through some unfortunate construction with his racing equipment was unable to participate today. But great to see you here in spirit, Joel, as we watch Michael Quant pit. So Grayson and Carter. Grayson, coming close to Carter, getting as close as he can, looking for a move on the inside. Goes alongside Carter, coming down into turn one. Runs a little late on the brakes, I got to think, and rotates that Mustang. And Carter, Grayson off track just a little bit. Carter's going to clean that up, and he's going to come out ahead, and he's going to say, no, sir, not today. I knew where my line was. Where was yours?
Battle continues here as we are just exactly halfway home. 35 minutes to go. Pit stops underway. I got to step out, but it will be Elliott Brown all the way home. Elliott?
Great to have you here, Jackson. Good luck, and have a great evening. So we continue into the second half of this race almost. We are at the 35-minute mark, with us coming close to the 32.5-minute mark, where the halfway stop is, as we watch Jake Stewart getting closer and closer to, this has to be a matte quant, and this is the hard part about the two quants. This is a matte quant. Jake in that BMW doing everything he can to keep as much high speed down the straightaways to close that gap up. Matt in that McLaren going to abuse the rotational capabilities and the agility of that car. So as we've mentioned, we do have a singular mandatory pit stop in this race for refueling. And so we've seen so far, we have 8 drivers who have pitted, have completed their stop. This is the undercut here, as we discussed and as we've seen some folks mention in the chat, is an extremely powerful move. We're going to keep an eye on those folks, as it is confirmed there is a 10-second penalty to Amos Movo for that move on Zach Martin going into turn 1. And that is unfortunate, but I can't say an unpredictable penalty in this case. So we ride on board with Matt Quant down the back straight, coming up to the tight chicane here at the end, as he tries and brake as late as he can and keeps the car as much curb as he can safely take in the wet, keeping it stable, correcting just a little bit for a little bit of that oversteer, but nothing that's problematic in my opinion. Sending that McLaren absolutely flying through these corners. It's incredible to see the skill set that these Quant brothers have built up, and the fact that they race together now and respectfully and with others. As we have 4 cars in the pits at the moment. That's going to 5 cars in the pits at the moment. Davin Sturdivant, Arjun, Carter Hain, Grayson Head, and Jorge Blasini Rivera. So that is our 3rd place, 4th place, 5th place, 7th, and 10th place. So we'll see where they come out in track position. But I got to think that Davin, at least, and Arjun have planned their move very, very predictably. As Thomas Homer looks to go outside on, that must be a back marker, or Zach Martin trying to unlap himself. And it is Martin in the Mustang trying to find a way to get past Homer to get back up into some positions where he feels like he belongs. Homer still having the pit, so effectively being a back marker at this point as both of them go wide through turn 1. We ride with Casey Jackman, who is a Josh Papa very close behind him. He's going to be fighting for position through the long chicane, I refer to it as here. Coming down the back straight, Casey getting a nice clean run out of the corner. Popov also getting a clean run and not being as far back as we might think he would have been. Coming into the tight chicane, the final chicane, as Jackman takes as much curb, a little too much curb, as he's going into the pits. So that makes a lot of sense. Casey looking to pit and get a little bit of track position out of it, I like to think. We look at Matt Quant with a Don Debian ahead and a Jake Stork behind, both going into the pits themselves. Matt staying out, trying to see how much of that clean air he can abuse here and get a nice high-speed run through the track and try and limit the damage that that undercut can do. Our 1st place and 2nd place, Landry and Charles pitting. So out front, the only drivers yet to pit, Slater, Popov, Jackman, Matt Quant, Don Debian, Jake Stork, and Jesse Beauclair. Jesse running an incredible race so far, keeping clean, keeping fast, so we're going to hope to see more work from him today. So we ride on board with Jesse coming through turn 1 and into turn 2 and 3 through the arena section. Showing that Porsche who's boss today, making sure that everybody knows what's going on. Fastest lap of the race so far held by Michael Landry, a 2:00.6. Incredibly fast. We're going to look to see how much more speed some of the drivers can pull out as the track hopes to dry up in this second half of the race. So after pit stops, we have Landry, Charles, Jackman, Debian, and Jake Stork. Looks like Evan might have got a bad run into or out of the pits on that one, and that's unfortunate. That's going to give him a little bit of work to do for the rest of the race. Okay, maybe I mistimed when I announced that because it looks like Davin's back up in effective 3rd. So position's not changing too much yet. We're going to continue to watch as drivers file out of the pits, and some more will file into the pits. But it does appear that one of the losers in the pits so far, unfortunately, has been Carter Hain. Somehow that pit strategy putting him back 2 positions beyond where he was prior to. So hopefully he puts in some work to pick that up as Matt Quant now goes into the pits, hoping that the work that he put in to help eliminate the threat of that undercut was worth it. Thomas Homer still working on trying to put some laps in before he stops. Looking at a BMW ahead of him. This must be a front marker of I gotta suspect this is either a Charles or actually this might have been Casey Jackman getting by. Yeah, this was This was Jackman getting by Homer, and that's going to give Homer a real thought about do I pit or not at the moment as he goes in. Brian Slater coming out, putting his car on track right behind. This must be the Zach Beauclair car. So Brian doing a great job to keep his pit stops tidy. Zach Martin running real tight to Jorge Blasini Rivera. Might be another position he gets to make up out of this race after that unfortunate incident into turn 1. Slater pushing that 296 as hard as he can around turn 5 and 6 here and getting a clean line out and going to send himself down that straightaway as fast as physically possible into turn 7, that hairpin down at the end. We ride with Grayson Head going up into the Schumacher S's, which is just ahead of where we just were with Brian Slater. Sending that Mustang as hard as possible through those lines. I mean, the precision that we're seeing out of these drivers is absolutely incredible. So we have a view of Grayson Head with the Carter Hayne behind him, and this battle is going to be interesting to see as we're going to look over at another battle going on right now, which is Davin Sturdivant with an Arjun Lakshmi Narasimhan right behind him. As Arjun, he keeps working on that car through that turn 15, but I don't think he's getting a clean enough line out of it. I think he's just having to fight it too much coming out. Davin's getting cleaner air. The overspray off of that car and the aero wash coming off of it are going to really give him a lot of work to do as Davin almost parks it into turn 1, forcing Arjun to check up just a little bit. Not too much that it's a problem, but just enough that it makes it harder to do his job. And Sturdivant keeping inside lines to defend, and that it's really forcing Arjun to have to think about, do I defend or attack here? Because Michael Quant is right there. And Arjun and Michael are going to be battling as well. So we have Sturdivant leading Arjun, leading Michael Quant in this battle heating up now as we got 3 cars trying to fight for that final podium position. Landry and Charles out way ahead at this point, plus 11 seconds for Sturdivant to Charles. So, second place possible, but I wouldn't count on it for if I were Sturdivant or Arjun or Michael. But Sturdivant right now doing his absolute most to make sure that he takes up as much track as possible, keeps that car as wide as possible. And here we see a little bit of a move from Michael Quant on Arjun. Is that going to shake things up behind Sturdivant? Not quite at the moment. But we're going to see another one of those coming up here. I think we've all kind of seen that Ford Mustang just has so much acceleration and speed out of corners that Mercedes has to contend with. The Mercedes corner's a little better, but the Mustang has so much more straight line speed. Coming out of the final turn 15, Sturdivant getting on the gas as early as he can without overdoing any rotation or causing himself any problems. Arjun doing the same. Michael Quant doing the same behind him. The delta between these drivers, 1.2 seconds in the rain, which is, you still get so much overspray from this as the track's slowly drying out. This is going to let him put a little bit of a faster lap time here. Zach Martin made his way around Jorge Blasini Rivera. That'll bring him up another position that he's lost since the beginning of this race to an unfortunate incident. Sturdivant taking every apex possible to park that NSX on, to force Arjun to take a wider line or check up a little bit more, and that defense is giving Arjun a lot of trouble with the car behind him. Michael Quant is going to be pushing hard as now we've got the field backing up a little bit. We've got Sturdivant followed by Arjun, followed by Michael Quant, followed by Grayson Head coming into the picture. So this battle for third starting to heat up, and we have 4 or 5 cars now thinking about that final podium position. So far, our biggest mover of the night being Jake Stork, moving up to 15th from what would have been a 22nd. 7 positions he has gained, followed very closely by Acosta, who's moved up 6 positions. Next, we have Slater, who's moved up 5. So quite a few drivers having made a bunch of moves due to incidents from other drivers on track, as Arjun is once again going down the straight as fast as he can, closing that gap to Sturdivant. Sturdivant taking up as much of the racetrack as possible to make it clear there is no door. You're going to have to put a hole in the wall if you really want this. Arjun thinking really hard about that hole in the wall as he comes very tight to Sturdivant, keeps that gap really close. Arjun getting the inside line, making that pass happen. Is he going to keep it down the straightaway, as both of them have had to sacrifice a line now? Sturdivant going out just ahead of Arjun again. Arjun really struggling to pass that Honda. The Honda having so much agility. We've talked about this all week. We've talked about this all race, all qualifying. And Sturdivant showing his absolute prowess when it comes to defense. In the back, we have Martin starting to think about a close-up on Amos Movo. That might shake things up in the last 20 minutes of the race. What's more, we have 5 cars here looking at this third place position. And this battle being absolutely incredibly difficult for Arjun and for Michael Quant, who in that Mustang thought, yeah, this might be a little easier than it should be. As Arjun, and a big mistake from Sturdivant. That's going to cost him at least 3 positions. That's an absolutely uncharacteristic mistake going into the hairpin. Sturdivant having to now look at where's he going to find a gap to bring that car back into the picture. Arjun having lost 2 positions, both to Mustangs, due to that incident and him being forced to check up after Sturdivant went off track. We have Carter Hayne and another NSX behind the pack, thinking now that he might have an opportunity to make a move. We have some folks in the chat who believe that they may have jinxed the battle between Arjun and Sturdivant. So we'll see how this goes. And it looked like there maybe was contact, maybe not. Hard to tell. We'll see if there's any information from the stewards as we progress into almost into the 20-minute mark to the close of this race. Our 3 front runners being Michael Landry, Mikhail Charles, and Michael Quant. Michael, and Michael, effectively. So from the bottom to the top, our top 10, Zach Martin, Amos Movo, who still has a 10-second penalty, and that's going to give Martin at least 1 position. Brian Slater in that number 2, 296 in 8th. Zach Beauclair in the 10 Porsche in 7th. Carter Hayne in the number 1 Honda in 6th. Arjun Lakshmi Narasimhan in the number 9 Mercedes in 5th. Grayson Head and Michael Quant in the 6 and 16 Mustangs respectively on the second row. And Mikhail Charles and Michael Landry finishing out the top 10. So in the back, I'm seeing some timing markers changing. Looks like we may have had some movement opportunity towards the back of the field. As we follow Luis Acosta being followed by Don Devienne. So we are under 20 minutes to go with a so far very exciting Nurburgring race here tonight in the very heavy rain. The rain certainly putting a damper on a lot of drivers' opportunities. It's unfortunately a reality of driving in weather conditions that aren't necessarily the most favorable. We look at Grayson Head up in 4th place, trying to close a gap to Michael Quant while also not being overtaken by Arjun Lakshmi Narasimhan. And there, it looks like there is a plus 15 second penalty for Arjun Lakshmi Narasimhan. And I think we can all guess what this is for. It looks like, according to the ruling, that that Mercedes didn't slow down enough and pushed the NSX of Davin Sturdivant around and cost him quite a few positions in this race. Battle up front for third still being a little bit tame at the moment. I don't see Arjun looking really for any opportunities now. I think he's realized I have a 15-second penalty and this sucks, and well, what can I do about it? And there isn't a ton that can be done as long as he keeps, a big enough delta to the group behind him. So at this point for Arjun, not attacking and not defending is the best way for him to clean up his race. We follow Leila Martinez in the McLaren in 21st position. Out front, Landry and Charles pulling away from the group behind them, that 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th group. Landry putting in absolute bangers of lap speed. Previous best of 2:00.6 stands. Incredibly fast speed to put in the track today. As we see Sturdivant closing on Jorge Blasini Rivera. How many positions does Sturdivant have the opportunity to make up after that big spin that he received from Arjun Lakshmi Narasimhan? Closing this gap to that BMW. The Honda being an extremely strong performer in the wet. We've seen it all night. We've seen Carter hold off in that 6th place position all night long without any trouble. Devin held off in 3rd up until an unfortunate contact. These cars being extremely powerful in these wet conditions. Despite all the movement around him, Haynes still being in the exact same position he qualified in. Our biggest shakers so far, Jake Stork with 7th-place motion, as we talked about before. Acosta up 6. Slater, after that incident with Davin and Arjun, is up 6. We have Michael Quant and Grayson Head up 5, and Arjun Lakshmi Narasimhan up 2. However, that will, unfortunately for Arjun, change at the end of the race due to that plus 15 seconds. Looking at the deltas now, it's very possible that Sturdivant sees himself ahead of Arjun when the final standings come. Unfortunately, that podium being well within reach is now a very sad fantasy. Sturdivant getting a clean line out of turn 1, closing the gap to Blasini Rivera. Going around 2, Sturdivant holding the inside line tight, keeping that gap tight, keeping it close. In this position, the overspray from the rain not necessarily being too strong of a factor as he continues to keep tight. Going through turn 4, Sturdivant taking the inside, going very fast out of the turn, letting the car rotate outwards, swing outwards to keep a lot of momentum in the vehicle through the corner. Going into turn 5, Sturdivant pulling again as inside of the track as he can, using as much of it as possible to put pressure on Jorge. Jorge now having to contend with the fact that that NSX may be faster than that BMW today. The gap between the two of them continues to be around 3 or 4 tenths of a second as they come around the hairpin, the area where Sturdivant unfortunately saw that spin. Keeping tight up into the Schumacher S's. Jorge touching the curb a little bit. Not necessarily a bad thing if he maintains control and accuracy. Continuing to move outward of the Schumacher S's into turn 10. Jorge braking and moving inside. Sturdivant moving inside. Both of them taking as much of the racing line as possible. We remember in Olton we saw Jorge stand behind Sturdivant for several laps, nearly the entire race if I recall correctly, and now at that coin is flipped around, and Sturdivant is unfortunately finding himself the one who has to attack and make up some positions. Coming around the final corner, Sturdivant being an absolute master of this corner at this track, knowing just how critical it is to get straight line speed down the straight. Keeping that gap tight, keeping that gap extremely close despite the straight line speed of that BMW, using as much of the draft as possible going down into turn 1. Going wide on the outside to cut deep on the inside, to cut wide on the outside again for the exit. Getting a much, much cleaner exit, it looks like, than Rivera saw. Into turn 2, through turn 2, into turn 3. Sturdivant again taking the exact racing line that he has chosen. Jorge really having to do a lot of work looking in his rearview mirror, thinking about that NSX behind him. The delta between them gravitating between 0.3 and 0.5 seconds, and Sturdivant being no stranger to putting pressure on folks and forcing them to make a mistake that they otherwise may not have or may not think that they were capable of. We go into the hairpin. Sturdivant keeping a clean line. Jorge keeping a clean line. Both of them carrying as much speed in, through, and out as possible. Up into the Schumacher S's. Rivera once again touching the outside curb. Inside curb, another inside curb. Not necessarily bad if you know what you're doing and you're careful with the throttle and the brake. Out front we see Grayson Head having overtaken Michael Quant for that final podium position. Michael now having to contend with Arjun behind him. Carter Haynes still back there keeping pressure on Arjun as well. Michael having fallen back a little bit from Grayson. Beginning to wonder what that may have been. Was that a little bit of overdriving on those tires and doing some damage to him? Gap between Sturdivant and Rivera still maintaining that 0.3, 0.4, 0.5 second margin. As Sturdivant closes a little bit coming in the arena section again. Ooh, and a little bit of a wiggle on the rear end. That's going to cost him just a hair of time. As he continues to keep a clean line, recovering well from that almost spin. Back end of that car really wanting to slide out. The tires at this point having been worn down quite a little bit from where he was earlier in the race. That spin from Arjun doing a little more damage to him as well. We see Carter Arjun closing on Michael Quant. Carter not necessarily having to think too hard about doing much work here if he's just looking for a one position ascension up the podium, up to the podium, towards the podium, I should say. Right now, Arjun's 15 seconds, potentially still putting him behind Sturdivant, depending on how the battle between JBR and Davin go throughout the rest of the race. Oh, and Davin goes way wide into the sand, and that's going to cost him a lot of time. That might make Popov have an opportunity to look and potentially gauge a pass coming up here into turn 10 and turn 11. Popov now closing on Sturdivant a little bit. Carter Arjun and Michael Quant continuing to do almost a parade procession around this track, and I can't necessarily blame them. Arjun having maybe learned a lesson from earlier when he attempted a pass that didn't quite make it work. Sturdivant now contending with Popov being within a half a second of him. Coming out of the final corner, how much more speed can he carry? Carries a nice clean line, letting the car run wide on its own, letting the steering unwind as he puts throttle in. Popov doing the same, but not quite as well as he sees that gap drop back a tenth or two. That Honda livery looking absolutely beautiful in these conditions. Towards the back, we have Don Debian moving a little closer to Luis Acosta. Potential exchange of positions in the final closing stages of this race there. We are at the 7.5 minute mark. Closing up on the last few laps we're going to see in this race. Last couple opportunities we're going to see drivers have to pass. Up front, we still have Carter Hayne keeping that gap to Arjun quite tight, quite neat. Not worried about passing Arjun because that's a guaranteed position coming up here at the end of the race. Sturdivant having built a little bit of a gap to Popov, now able to think about, can I close to JBR again or not? At this stage of the race, with the tire conditions and the fuel levels they'll be running, it'll be tough for that Honda to pick up enough speed to be able to close the gap, but certainly possible with the driver of that particular vehicle. The sun begins to set here in the Nurburgring as we run towards the final 6.5 minutes of this race tonight. We've only seen 2 retirements tonight in the race. I'll have to look and see if I can determine who those are. Final couple of laps here, and as it stands, in the lead with the first place podium position, Michael Landry at the moment in that McLaren, followed by Mikhail Charles in that BMW, and not very closely followed by, so if Landry keeps it clean for the rest of the race, this is a guaranteed win. Next up, we have Grayson Head with a very tight coupling of folks behind him. Michael Quant, Arjun Lakshmi Narasimhan, Carter Hayne, Zach Beauclair down in 7th place, the leader of the 2 BFE Porsches, certainly putting in a strong running today. Brian Slater in the number 2 Ferrari. Amos Movo in the 27 Ferrari, having made up quite a few positions after his incident with Zach Martin. Zach being 2 seconds behind him at the moment in 10th place. Zach being guaranteed a move up the ladder once the checkered flag flies with Amos's 10-second penalty. Jorge Blasini Rivera in 11th, followed by Davin Sturdivant in 12th. Both of these drivers will see a promotion most likely when the checkered flag flies. Depending on the timing and the deltas, they may see 2. Next is Josh Popov, Casey Jackman, Jake Stork, Matt Quant, Luis Acosta, Don Debian, Ty Swit, David Pacagnini, Layla Martinez, Jesse Beauclair, and finally Keith Bull. Our two retirements being, I believe, Nick Johnson and Thomas Homer. We want to remind folks that registrations in this league are, in fact, open all year round. We run 6-week seasons with typically 6 or 7 week off seasons. We're in the final 3.5 minutes of this pro level race. 2 remaining penalties to be served at the end of the race due to race time. Stick around at the end of the race as we'll try to get some of the drivers into the broadcast to talk about some work that they may have put in and their driving throughout the event. So we'll take a brief break while I go wrangle some folks. Michael Landry. We talked about Michael earlier in the broadcast. We talked about Michael this week, the unfortunate incident that he saw in Bathurst, and this drive being an absolute redemption drive from him, showing just, in fact, how good he really is in this car, and that was not an indicator of future progress. Zach Beauclair looking to get in on a little action with this battle. As Carter Hayne has made it past Arjun, Zach now thinking, okay, I have an opportunity to make a pass. Whether Zach does or not, personally, if I'm in that car, I say, you know what, we just leave it. He's got 15 seconds, I don't. This is going to be a good time. As I am reminded by the chat that they would like to see a little bit more ballast added to Michael Landry and Mikhail Charles. I'll see what I can do, but no promises. 5-way battle for third place. Grayson Head, Michael Quant, Carter Hayne, Arjun Lakshmi Narasimhan, and Zach Beauclair. I say 5-way. Really, it's a 4-way battle as we move into the final minute and 10 seconds of this race. The last opportunity for any movement. Sturdivant still looking at Blasini Rivera ahead of him, but thinking, you know what? I don't think I can make it happen. Down in the back, we still have Don Debian looking very tight to Luis Acosta. Don having been behind Luis for, I believe, a majority of this race. Driving very strongly for both of these drivers as Ty Swit now looks to join the fray. Despite the couple major incidents we had, a surprisingly clean race here in the rain at the wet Nurburgring. We have 20 seconds until the white flag flies, and Michael Landry right now coming around the hairpin, so we will have one more full lap of running here. We see a position switch. Arjun Lakshmi Narasimhan ahead of Carter Hayne again. Arjun having made a move into turn 1 as we see an incident with a couple cars towards, were they towards the back? Josh Popov having a little bit of an issue. Not having affected any of the folks ahead of him, fortunately. Zach Beauclair looking ahead at Carter, thinking about that final place opportunity that he may have, being guaranteed a promotion from 7th to 6th at the end of the race, thinking maybe I can get a promotion to 5th as well if I play my cards right here. Landry having made it through the checkered flag, our winner tonight, Michael Landry in that beautiful number 3 McLaren. Little bit of motion here in the back, or not the back, but I'm sorry, up front for that battle for 4th place here. Carter Hayne having moved around Zach Beauclair, Arjun having lost out a little bit in this battle. Both of them now looking at Michael Quant for that 4th place position. Not quite a podium, but nothing to scoff at either. However, Grayson Head ahead will probably be our 3rd place winner, assuming he doesn't run out of fuel, which has happened before, which is why I wait until the checkered flag, and there we go. So our top 3 for quite a bit of this race for the last little bit, Michael Landry, Mikhail Charles, Grayson Head, followed by Matt Quant, Carter Haynes, Zach Beauclair, Arjun Lakshmi Narasimhan, Brian Slater, Amos Movo, Zach Martin, Jorge Blasini Rivera, Davin Sturdivant, Josh Popov, Casey Jackman, Jake Stork, Matt Quant, Luis Acosta, and Keith Bull still out on track. So the time penalty from Amos Movo having been applied. Amos has left the session for the moment. Stand by for a few moments while I go look for some folks to see if we can wrangle around some interviews.
Yeah.
Right. So we are here with 4 of our drivers, 3 of our drivers. Grayson not deciding what he wants to do quite yet. I will get him and we will talk to him. We have Michael Landry, our 1st place victor, Mikhail Charles in 2nd place, and Davin Sturdivant. And let's talk first to Davin. You saw an unfortunate incident in the turn 7. How did you manage your race afterwards? What were the thoughts in your head?
Well, after I got by the initial disappointment, I thought about staying out of the way, which lost me a ton of time. And then after that, after you get back in safely, I kind of just fell into a rhythm, right? A lot of the cars have the same delta, so it's going to be hard to pass cars in front. Like once I got to Jorge, it's like when you get knocked out of 3rd, you just consolidate points, right?
Sure.
So, got to finish the damn thing.
And
It wasn't, like you can't be mad when your own driving doesn't let you down, so you just do your best.
it looks like, according to the timing board, you did at least see a promotion from Arjun and Amos Movo. So if there's any consolidation, you saw 10th place out of this race tonight if the results drop the way that my screen says they should. It was an
No.
unfortunate incident. It did cost you a ton of time.
It happens. It happens. The qualifying was probably more reassuring than the race because I was closer to pole than I've ever been. So I know I can do it.
Yeah.
And if I have good partners that think about the big picture, then I know I can finish it. So that's also encouraging. Wasn't a bad race, just a typical one.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that these types of incidents happen, and the stewards were very quick to point out that Arjun made a very serious mistake. So at least we know that the group we have working with us here are doing their job to make sure that the races stay as well governed as they can. So I do want to give props out to the stewarding team. You folks are doing a wonderful job. Next, let's talk to Mikhail. You spent
Hello.
a very long time driving behind Landry. However, you did an incredible job of driving that BMW in the rain. how are you feeling after that second place today?
I'm not feeling good. I should have gotten first, but I don't know what happened. I just had no pace. I came on today. It just felt bad. I don't know if it was because I'm kind of new to the car. I don't know if it's just I'm just bad and I just can't adapt that well because it just felt like the drier the track got, the less pace I had. I just didn't feel correct. I was just understeering all over the place. Sometimes snap over, so it just didn't feel good. I don't know,
I
maybe if I just messed up the setup or I'm just bad, but it
I
just
mean,
wasn't good.
you say you had no pace, but you had some 10 seconds or more to the person in third. So I don't know that I necessarily agree with that.
20,
I think
20, 27.
yeah, so there it is. You had almost a half a minute to the third place position. You drove that car absolutely brilliantly, despite the conditions, the weather, the fact that driving the front engine cars today looked very difficult. So I want to give you serious props for the work that you put in. You qualified very well. You drove very well. You raced very well. Davin, you qualified extremely well for, the typical group that we have. I was almost taken aback by that. It was incredible to see. I think that you have a very, very good opportunity coming up here in the rest of the season and the next season to look at a second place, taking Mikhail and putting him in your rearview mirror, as I know you
Uh,
love.
yeah, yeah. I think that this was my best chance for the year. So the rest of the year is just gathering information, right?
Sure.
So that's fine.
So last but not least, Michael Landry, our victor today. How's it feel? You wiped out at Bathurst on the last lap, unfortunately sacrificing all the work you had done in the race to be ahead of the group. How are you feeling? Does this feel like redemption?
Oh yeah, batter is just a mistake happened. So happened at the last lap. Was unfortunate, but you get over it and then you prepare for the next one. And this one will feel a lot better.
And prepare you did. You put in absolute steamers, your fastest lap being just at that 2 minute mark, 2 minutes and 6 tenths. I mean, that's an incredible amount of speed to carry on this track. So congratulations to, everyone who, I mean, you guys put in so much work over the week and it certainly shows. So I want to congratulate all three of you on such a fun race to witness today.
Thanks for the hard work, Elliot. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right, and with that, we're going to close up today. I may see if I can go grab Grayson momentarily. So to our audience, please hold off for just a moment. So I am here with Grayson Head, our third place podium position. Grayson, please tell the group, how does that feel?
I'm a lot less stressed now that it's over. It was
There
I
was a battle
decided
at the
that
end there with you, Michael Quant, Carter Hain, Arjun. I mean, all four of you trying to fight for that third place position.
yeah, and I gave myself a little bit of breathing room, but then I had a big mistake, I think on the second to last lap, and they were right back up on me. So it was the last two laps weren't fun. But yeah, I've been trying to just stay chill and not get too excited when people are right up on me, and pretty happy that worked this time. So
I mean, that's something we talk about a lot in this group, isn't it? Pressure management, making sure that you can handle cars being behind you and making sure that you can keep your own pace without sacrificing an opportunity to them. And you did a brilliant job of it. Despite that mistake you may have made, I mean, you did incredible.
yeah,
So,
it was definitely it was fun.
it looked like it. So I want to close up here to our audience. We had a great running here at the Nurburgring. We had a beautiful race in the wet, very minimal chaos from our normal standpoint of wet racing. We will see everybody next week, we're hoping, here at the same time, same channel. And that one's going to be a very fun changing conditions race over at Monza. So for those of you who are looking for some excitement, we are going to see some next week at the Temple of Speed. Thank you, everybody, and have a great night.